Title: Cheating wife poisons her husband and son when betrayal turns deadly. A husband uncovers the darkest secret of the woman he trusted most. But what happens when love, lust, and greed explode into murder? In a quiet American suburb, Michael thought he had it all: a loving wife, a brilliant son, and the perfect home. But when he discovered his wife Sarah's affair, he never imagined it would spiral into a nightmare of poison, lies, and revenge. The perfect suburban family neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where lawns were trimmed every Saturday morning, where American flags waved gently on porches, and where neighbors borrowed sugar with smiles that looked almost rehearsed. It was the picture of suburban perfection: neat, safe, and quiet. And at the heart of this seemingly perfect neighborhood lived Michael and Sarah Whitmore with their 12-year-old son, Ethan. Michael was the kind of man people trusted instantly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that carried both strength and gentleness. A respected architect, he often came home with rolled-up blueprints under his arm and a smile that melted away the day's stress. His colleagues admired him, his neighbors respected him, and Ethan, his only child, idolized him. Sarah, his wife, was adored by the neighborhood for entirely different reasons. With her golden hair and dazzling smile, she seemed to light up every backyard barbecue, PTA meeting, or church gathering. She was the mother who baked cookies for Ethan's class, the wife who threw the best holiday parties, the friend who remembered birthdays. To everyone else, Sarah was flawless, and Ethan was the glue that seemed to bind their little family together. With his dark hair and curious eyes, he carried the sharp wit of his father and the easy charm of his mother. He loved video games, science experiments, and drawing superheroes. More than anything, he loved when his parents sat beside him at the dinner table, teasing each other like young lovers while he laughed. On the surface, the Whitmores had everything. That summer evening, the backyard smelled of grilled steak and roasted corn. Michael flipped the meat on the barbecue while Ethan chased fireflies across the lawn. Sarah carried out lemonade in tall glasses, her sundress swaying as the wind whispered through the trees. A golden sunset painted the horizon, and laughter filled the air. From across the street, their neighbor, Mrs. Riley, smiled, muttering to herself, "The perfect family." But perfect was just a word. Inside Sarah, a storm brewed. She laughed when Michael cracked a joke about burning the steak. She clapped when Ethan caught a firefly. She touched Michael's arm like any loving wife would, but her mind wasn't there. Her heart had drifted far away, into a secret world she guarded like a locked diary. Every vibration of her phone in her pocket sent her pulse racing. Every glance at Michael's kind, unsuspecting face brought with it a sharp pang of guilt and, strangely, resentment. She had once loved him deeply, yes. She had once looked at their suburban home and thought it was everything she had dreamed of. But dreams, she learned, could sour with time. And somewhere between carpools, PTA meetings, and the steady predictability of Michael's love, Sarah had begun to suffocate. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, Michael kissed her on the forehead, whispering, "I love you, Sarah. Don't ever forget that." She smiled back, but the words stuck in her throat like ashes. As he slept beside her, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed again on the nightstand. She reached for it quietly, heart pounding, and read the message that made her lips curve into a smile. She hadn't shown Michael in years. "Can't stop thinking about you. Tomorrow, same place?" Her finger hovered, then typed back, "Yes," and with that single word, the perfect suburban family began its slow march toward ruin. A stranger in the shadows. It started innocently, at least. That's what Sarah told herself. The local gym was where Sarah went every Tuesday and Thursday morning, after dropping Ethan at school and before heading to the grocery store or yoga class. It was routine, part of the suburban rhythm. But one Tuesday in late spring, the rhythm shifted. He was there, lean, dark-haired, his body sculpted with the kind of confidence that came from youth and discipline. His name was Daniel Hart. He worked as a personal trainer, though he often joked that training was just a side gig until his real dreams took off. He had that careless charm that could melt insecurities and awaken desires long buried. At first, it was nothing more than polite exchanges. A smile when she passed, a comment on her progress, a casual hand resting on her arm to correct her form. But Sarah felt something she hadn't in years: attention. Pure, undivided attention. Michael loved her, yes, but his love had grown comfortable, predictable. Daniel's gaze, however, was electric, dangerous. One morning, after a particularly grueling set, Daniel leaned closer than necessary, his breath brushing her ear. "You push harder than most people here," he said softly. "I like that." Sarah's cheeks warmed. She should have laughed it off, should have brushed it aside. But instead, she found herself craving that voice, that thrill, that validation. Over the weeks, their conversations stretched longer. Sarah lingered after workouts, laughing at Daniel's stories about failed auditions, wild nights, and the life he lived outside the quiet suburb. He was everything Michael wasn't: reckless, spontaneous, intoxicating, and slowly, the line between playful flirtation and forbidden desire blurred. One rainy afternoon, Sarah sat in her SUV outside the gym, hands gripping the wheel, debating with herself. She should go home. She should bake Ethan's favorite cookies, fold the laundry, and wait for Michael to return from work. That was her role. That was her life. But then her phone buzzed. "Daniel, don't drive off. Meet me round back." Her pulse quickened. Against every voice of reason screaming inside her, Sarah obeyed. Behind the gym, the rain fell in sheets, washing the world in silver streaks. Daniel leaned against his car, soaked but unbothered, his smile as sharp as lightning. Without a word, he reached for her hand, pulling her close. The kiss came fast, urgent, reckless, the kind of kiss that felt like both a crime and a salvation. Sarah gasped, her wedding ring cold against his skin as she clutched his shirt. For the first time in years, she felt alive. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel's grin widened. "You don't have to go back to sleepwalking, Sarah. You deserve more." Her mind screamed wrong, dangerous, betrayal, but her body betrayed her with a shiver of agreement. That night, as Michael set the table and Ethan talked about his science project, Sarah sat quietly, her lips still tingling from Daniel's kiss. She laughed at Ethan's joke, nodded at Michael's story about the office, and yet her thoughts were elsewhere. After dinner, she excused herself, retreating to the bathroom where she locked the door. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, same time tomorrow?" She typed back, hands trembling. Yes, and in that single choice, the shadows of desire crept deeper into her life. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Ethan had noticed something. Earlier, as he fetched his notebook from the living room, he had seen her smiling at her phone in a way he hadn't seen before. A smile that wasn't for him. A smile that wasn't for Dad either. He frowned, but said nothing. He was only 12. But sometimes children see truths adults are blind to. Later that night, as Sarah lay in bed beside Michael, she stared at the ceiling again. Her husband's steady breathing should have comforted her. Instead, it felt like a cage. Her phone, hidden under the pillow, buzzed once more. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. "Neither could you, right?" Her heart thundered as she typed back. "No, I can't stop either." In that moment, Sarah Whitmore, the perfect suburban wife, the doting mother, the woman neighbors envied, became a stranger even to herself. And Daniel Hart, the shadow in her carefully ordered life, had taken root in her heart. Chapter 2 word count 1050. The forbidden kiss. Summer heat lingered long after sunset,
At least,
wrapping the
that's
Whitmore
what
home
Michael
in a
thought.
heavy stillness.
She had told him
Michael
she was going
sat
to
at
meet
his
some of the
drafting
PTA
table in the
mothers
study,
to plan the
pencils
upcoming
scratching
school
across
fundraiser.
parchment
He
as
believed her
sketched a new
without
project.
hesitation.
Ethan
Why
was
wouldn't
sprawled
he?
on the living
Sarah
room
was
floor with his
dependable,
Lego set,
trustworthy,
building a
the
tower
anchor
that leaned
of their
dangerously
family.
to one side.
But truth was
and
no
Sarah, she
longer
was living
nowhere
under
to be
the
found.
Whitmore roof. Sarah's car sat parked 2 streets over, hidden in the shadow of a giant oak tree. She sat inside, hands trembling on the wheel as she tried to steady her breathing. Beside her, Daniel's car idled, headlights off. He got out first, tapping lightly on her window. "Come on," he whispered, eyes gleaming. Moments later, they were together in the secluded corner of a nearby park, shielded by tall hedges and the hum of cicadas. Sarah's heart pounded as Daniel pulled her into his arms, his lips claiming hers in a kiss far bolder, far hungrier than the stolen one behind the gym. This was no accident, no curiosity. This was a choice. Sarah melted against him, the scent of his cologne intoxicating, his hands fierce against her back. For the first time in years, she felt the spark of passion she thought marriage had buried forever. When they finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his chest, gasping for breath. "This is insane. If anyone found out, no one will." Daniel cut her off, lifting her chin. "Michael doesn't see you anymore, but I do. And you deserve to be seen, Sarah." His words slid through her like poison disguised as honey. She should have run, should have ended it before it spread too deep. Instead, she kissed him again, harder, sealing her fate with lips that belonged to another man. Back at the Whitmore house, Ethan glanced out the window. He had finished his Lego tower and gone upstairs to look for his mom. When he didn't find her in the kitchen or bedroom, he peered through the blinds, scanning the street. That's when he noticed it, a dark car parked under the flickering streetlight. The same car he had seen weeks ago near the gym when Mom came home late. He squinted, curiosity sharpening into a sneeze. The engine roared to life, and the car pulled away, headlights briefly illuminating the street before vanishing into the night. Ethan frowned, his young mind filing the detail away like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. He didn't mention it to Dad. Something told him not to. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. Later that night, Sarah slipped back into the house, her hair slightly damp from the summer humidity, her lipstick smudged just enough for careful eyes to notice. Michael was still in his study, lost in blueprints. Ethan had dozed off on the couch. Lego tower collapsed beside him. Sarah leaned down to kiss her son's forehead, her heart tightening when he stirred and blinked sleepily at her. For a moment, guilt clawed at her chest. "Hey buddy," she whispered. "Go on up to bed." He nodded, too tired to question where she'd been. But as he climbed the stairs, he looked back at her once, something unsettled flickering in his eyes. Sarah exhaled sharply, then smoothed her dress before stepping into the study. "Long night?" she asked Michael, brushing his shoulder. He smiled up at her, tired but warm. "Yeah, you wouldn't believe how stubborn this design is being." "How was your meeting?" "Fine," she lied, her voice steady, her heart still racing from Daniel's touch. "Just fine." Michael leaned over, kissing her cheek. "You do too much. Thank you for always holding us together." Sarah swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Of course, but as she slipped into bed later that night, she could still taste Daniel's kiss on her lips. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a wife coming home. She felt like an intruder in her own marriage. The husband's doubts. Michael Whitmore wasn't a man who believed in suspicion. He built houses for a living, solid, measured, reliable. He believed in straight lines, firm foundations, and trust. But lately, something in his own home felt uneven. It started with the late nights. Sarah had always been busy, yes, but she was predictable. PTA meetings, yoga classes, book clubs. Michael could set his watch to her schedule. Yet now, she came home late, distracted, her excuses vague, running errands, got caught up at the store, stayed back to help a friend. Each time, her smile seemed just a little too rehearsed. Michael tried to dismiss it. Marriage had its ebbs and flows. People got busy, tired, distracted. Still, the unease grew, gnawing at him in quiet moments. One Friday evening, as Michael packed away his drafting tools, Ethan wandered into the study. His son had that look again, the one where he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" Michael looked up. Do you think Mom's okay?" Ethan's voice was small, hesitant. Michael blinked. "Of course. Why do you ask?" Ethan fidgeted with the hem of his t-shirt. Sometimes she's gone a lot, and I saw this car outside the house. A few times?" Michael frowned. "What kind of car?" "A black one. Big. I think it's a Dodge. The same one I saw when we picked Mom up from the gym once." Ethan hesitated, then added, "I don't know. Maybe it's nothing." Michael reached over, squeezing his son's shoulder. "Thanks for telling me, champ." But inside, a knees sharpened into something heavier. That night, as Sarah sat across the table, laughing too brightly at Ethan's joke, Michael studied her. The way her eyes darted to her phone when it buzzed. The way her smile lingered after she checked it. "Who's that?" he asked casually. "Just a niece from the PTA," Sarah said smoothly, slipping the phone face down onto the table. Michael forced a smile, but his gut told him otherwise. He had designed enough houses to know when something was crooked. You couldn't just paint over it and pretend it was straight. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Sarah claimed she was attending a late-night book club meeting. But when Michael kissed her goodbye at the door, he caught a whiff of perfume heavier than usual, the kind she wore when they first dated. He stood at the window long after her car disappeared down the street. His chest tightened. Something was wrong. By midnight, Sarah returned, hair tousled, lipstick faintly smudged. Michael waited in bed, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. She slid under the covers quietly, as if not to disturb him. But her silence said more than any excuse could. The next morning, Michael drove into town not to work, but to a quiet office above the hardware store. The brass plaque on the door read, Harrison & Co. Investigations. Inside, the smell of coffee and cigarette smoke clung to the air. A man in his 50s, grizzled and sharp-eyed, greeted him. Michael Whitmore? Yes. I'm Jack Harrison. What can I do for you? Michael hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. Admitting suspicion felt like betrayal itself. But the image of Sarah's secretive smile flashed in his mind, and Ethan's voice echoed. I saw this car outside the house. My wife, Michael said finally. I think she's having an affair. Jack leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. Do you want to know the truth, even if it hurts? Michael swallowed. Yes, I need to know. The detective nodded slowly, scribbling notes on a yellow pad. Then leave it to me. As Michael walked out of the office, a weight pressed against his chest. He didn't know what was worse, the possibility that Sarah was guilty, or the hope that she wasn't. Either way, the cracks in the Whitmores' perfect home were widening, and soon the whole structure would come crashing down. The poison plan. Sarah Whitmore had once sworn her vows under the soft glow of candlelight, promising love and loyalty until death. But standing in Daniel's apartment one humid July evening, death was no longer just a vow's endpoint, it was a possibility she entertained. The apartment was small, cluttered with gym bags and half-empty beer bottles, nothing like the orderly Whitmore home. Yet Sarah felt strangely alive here, unchained from the suffocating neatness of her suburban cage. She lay across Daniel's couch, her head resting on his bare chest as the TV flickered with some muted crime show. His fingers traced lazy circles along her arm. You can't keep living like this, Daniel murmured, sneaking out, making excuses. He doesn't deserve you. Sarah sighed, eyes fixed on the shadows dancing across the ceiling. It's not that simple. He's good. He's always been good, but he's predictable, safe. I don't feel anything anymore. Daniel shifted, sitting up, his eyes sharper now. Then leave him. I can't. The word slipped out before she could stop it. There's Ethan, the house, the money. If I walk away, I lose everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated when she talked like this, like Michael still had power over her. So what then? You're just going to keep living two lives? Running between us like some kind of don't? She snapped, cutting him off. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the truth buried in his accusation. Silence filled the room, thick and uneasy. Then Daniel leaned in, his tone darker. There's another way, Sarah. She blinked, staring at him. What are you talking about? If he wasn't around, if Michael wasn't in the picture. Daniel let the words hang, his meaning heavy in the air. Sarah's stomach flipped. You're insane. Am I? He leaned closer, his voice a whisper now. Think about it. You'd have the house, the money, no more sneaking. Just you, me, and freedom. Her heart raced. The idea was monstrous, unthinkable, and yet, part of her didn't recoil. Part of her listened. Michael's careful, she whispered, more to herself than to him. He doesn't drink much, doesn't gamble, doesn't take risks. He'd never. It would have to look natural. Daniel smirked, sensing the door to her conscience cracking open. People die suddenly all the time. Heart attacks, accidents, poison. Sarah's eyes snapped to him. The word felt foreign on her lips when she repeated it. Poison. Daniel nodded. Quiet, clean. If you do it right, no one ever knows. Sarah shook her head, pressing her palms to her temples. This is crazy. This is murder. Daniel cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. No, this is freedom. You want freedom, don't you? Her lips parted, but no words came. That night, back in her pristine suburban kitchen, Sarah couldn't shake his voice from her head. Poison, quiet, clean. She stood at the counter, staring at a half-empty bottle of red wine. Michael loved wine with dinner. Ethan, too young, would sometimes sneak a sip when Michael wasn't looking, giggling at the taste. The thought should have warmed her heart. Instead, it made her chest tighten. She imagined pouring to glasses Michael's deep and rich, hers untouched. She imagined slipping a single drop of something colorless, tasteless, irreversible. The vision both horrified and thrilled her. She slammed the bottle back into the cabinet, her hands shaking. What am I thinking? She scolded herself. I'm not a killer. I'm a wife, a mother. But deep down, in the cracks of her restless heart, the seed Daniel planted began to take root. 2 days later, Sarah found herself at the library, pretending to search for cookbooks while her eyes scanned the shelves for something else entirely. When she spotted a volume on medicinal herbs and poisons, her pulse spiked. She slipped it into her bag, heart hammering as if she'd already committed a crime. That evening, as Michael kissed her cheek and Ethan chattered about his day, Sarah smiled sweetly. She passed the mashed potatoes, nodded at their stories, and laughed in all the right places. But in her mind, she wasn't listening. She was planning. A deadly dinner. Whitmore kitchen smelled of garlic, rosemary, and roasted meat. On the surface, it was just another Tuesday night in Willow Creek, a family dinner, the kind neighbors envied. But beneath the warm glow of the pendant lights, something sinister brewed. Sarah moved gracefully around the kitchen, humming softly as she set the table. Her movements were practiced, but tonight every gesture carried an edge of calculation. The wine glasses gleamed under the light. The roast chicken sizzled in the oven. And on the counter, a tiny glass vial sat hidden inside the pocket of her apron. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She told herself to stop, that this was madness. But then Daniel's voice echoed in her mind, freedom, Sarah, freedom. She uncorked the vial. The liquid inside was clear, innocent looking, like water. Just a few drops, that's all it would take. Michael walked in, loosening his tie, his smile warm. Smells incredible in here. You spoil us. Sarah forced a laugh. Just wanted to make something special. Ethan bounded in next, carrying his science project board under one arm. Mom, Dad, wait till you see this volcano model explode. Sarah's chest tightened. She glanced at her son, the boy who trusted her completely, who looked at her as if she hung the stars in the sky. Don't do it, her conscience screamed. You'll destroy everything. But her hand moved anyway. As Michael stepped into the dining room to pour the wine, Sarah tilted the vial, letting 3 drops slip into his glass. They vanished instantly, swallowed by the deep red. Her heart pounded, so hard she thought it might burst. Then Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts. Can I have a sip tonight, Mom? Just one? Like Dad always lets me? Sarah froze, her blood turning to ice. Michael chuckled from the other room. One sip, buddy. Just don't tell Mom I'm the bad influence. Sarah's vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to snatch the glass from her son's reach, to smash it against the wall. But her body betrayed her. She set the glass down at Michael's place, hands trembling. Dinner began. The 3 of them sat together, laughter echoing as Ethan described his school project. Michael teased Sarah about burning the rolls. Sarah smiled, nodding, her fork untouched. Then, it happened. Michael lifted the glass first, taking a long sip, sighing with contentment. Perfect, he said, wiping his lips. Ethan giggled, reaching for the glass next. My turn. Sarah's chest constricted. Her hand twitched toward him. But it was too late. Ethan took a quick sip before Michael playfully ruffled his hair. Moments later, the first cough came. Michael frowned, pressing his chest. Weird. Must have gone down wrong. He coughed again, harder this time. His face paled, sweat breaking across his brow. Ethan laughed nervously. Dad? Then Ethan coughed too. Sarah's fork clattered to her plate. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael pushed back from the table, gasping for breath. His body convulsed, his hand clutching at the tablecloth as his eyes widened in horror. Sarah, he croaked, collapsing onto the floor. Ethan followed seconds later, his small body trembling as he wheezed for air. His wide, terrified eyes locked on hers. Mom, it hurts, Sarah screamed, rushing to him, cradling his head in her lap. Her tears blurred everything as his breathing grew shallow. No, not you, baby, not you. The perfect family dinner shattered into chaos. Neighbors would later say they heard Sarah's cries that night, raw, broken wails that cut through the stillness of Willow Creek. By the time the ambulance arrived, Michael was gone. Ethan clung to life, barely breathing, his small body pale against the paramedics' hands. As the sirens faded into the distance, Sarah collapsed at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty wine glass. Her reflection stared back at her in its red surface, a stranger, a monster, a murderer. For the first time, she realized what freedom really cost, and it wasn't the price she had imagined. The collapsed hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair. Sarah sat in the waiting room, her hands shaking, her blouse stained with Ethan's blood. Every clock tick stabbed at her nerves. She could still hear the sirens, the screech of tires, Ethan's gasps for air as paramedics tried to keep him alive. But louder than all of it was the silence in her head, the silence left by Michael's lifeless body sprawled across their dining room floor. The perfect suburban dream was over. A doctor finally appeared, his face grim. Mrs. Whitmore, Sarah, stood so quickly her knees buckled. My son Ethan? My husband? The doctor hesitated. That pause was worse than words. Your husband didn't make it. The words hung heavy, crushing the air from her lungs. Sarah staggered back, pressing a hand to her chest as if to hold her heart inside. She had wanted him gone, had dreamed of his absence. Yet hearing it spoken aloud broke something inside her. And my boy? She whispered, voice trembling. He's alive, but critical. We've stabilized him for now, but his condition is fragile. We'll keep him under observation in ICU. Sarah collapsed into the chair, her head in her hands, tears spilling freely. It wasn't grief for Michael, it was relief tangled with guilt. But for Ethan, the pain was unbearable. She had meant to free herself, not destroy her son. What have I done? The news spread fast. By dawn, the whispers had already begun in Willow Creek. Michael Whitmore, the beloved community man, dead at 43. Ethan Whitmore, the bright-eyed boy, fighting for his life. And Sarah, the grieving widow, the mother clinging to hope. Neighbors brought casseroles and flowers. Friends hugged her tightly, murmuring empty words about strength and prayers. Sarah nodded, played her role, even managed tears on cue. Inside, she was hollow, but not everyone was fooled. Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with sharp eyes, visited the hospital the next morning. His handshake was firm, his gaze steady. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sorry for your loss. I'll need to ask you a few questions about last night. Sarah forced a nod. Of course. Your husband and son both collapsed suddenly during dinner? Yes. We were eating, and then, it happened. Her voice cracked, perfectly rehearsed. Did your husband have any health conditions? No, nothing serious. Harris scribbled notes, his expression unreadable. And no one else shared the same food or drink. Sarah's throat tightened. Just the three of us. His pen paused, just for a second, but she noticed. That night, when she returned home, the house was eerily silent. The table was still set, plates untouched, wine glasses half full. The dark stain where Michael had fallen remained on the rug. Sarah sat at the table, staring at the empty seat across from her. For years, she had hated Michael, his control, his dismissive tone, his way of making her feel small. And yet, she never imagined she'd be here, alone. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. It's done. We're free now. Come to me. Sarah's hand shook as she typed back. Free? My son is dying. Don't ever say that again. For the first time, she didn't feel excitement at Daniel's words, only dread. The next morning, she returned to the hospital. Ethan lay pale against the white sheets, tubes running into his small arms, machines beeping steadily. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a fragile miracle. Sarah sank to her knees beside him, clutching his hand. I'm so sorry, baby, she whispered, her tears soaking the sheets. Please don't leave me. I'll do anything. Please fight. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Behind her, footsteps approached. Detective Harris again. His tone was gentle, but his words carried weight. Mrs. Whitmore, the toxicology report came back on your husband. It wasn't natural causes. Sarah froze, her heart slamming in her chest. Harris continued, his eyes narrowing. There was poison in his system, enough to kill a grown man. Your son ingested some too, but less. That's the only reason he's still alive. Sarah's blood ran cold. The detective leaned closer, his voice low. Tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, who would want your husband dead? Sarah swallowed hard, her face blank, her lies ready on her tongue. But inside, her world was collapsing, piece by piece. Suspicions rise. Detective Harris wasn't the kind of man who believed in coincidences. In his 20 years on the force, he had seen too many accidents unravel into betrayals, greed, and secrets. And now, sitting across from Sarah Whitmore. He saw the tremor in her hands, the slight delay before her answers, the way her eyes darted away when poison was mentioned. He leaned back in the stiff hospital chair, studying her. Mrs. Whitmore, I'll need a list of everything your family ate and drank last night. Exact details. Wine, dessert, all of it. Sarah clasped her hands together to keep them from shaking. Of course, I'll make a list. Do that. His gaze softened for a moment, almost kindly. I understand you're grieving, but sometimes grief makes people talk too much or too little. Just know this. If someone hurt your husband and son, I will find them. The words were a promise and a warning. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Ethan's fragile breaths echoed in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael's face twisted in agony, his hand clawing at the tablecloth before going still. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, why haven't you answered me? We should be celebrating. He's gone. Sarah, my son is in the ICU. Do you understand what that means? He might die. Daniel, it was supposed to work clean, just him. Something went wrong. That's not on me. Sarah, don't text me again. Not until I say. She deleted the thread immediately, her pulse racing, but paranoia clung to her. What if the police checked her phone? What if Daniel got sloppy? 2 days later, Harris visited her again. This time, at her house, the crime scene team had already combed the dining room, bagging the wine glasses and food scraps. Sarah had scrubbed the counters until her fingers bled, but still, every corner of the room screamed guilt. Harris wandered through the kitchen like a wolf sniffing for prey. He picked up a bottle of Merlot from the counter, turning it in his hands. This the same wine you drank that night? Sarah nodded too quickly. Yes, we all shared a bottle. Funny thing, Harris said, setting it down. Toxicology showed traces of oleander. Nasty stuff. Causes heart failure, seizures. Grows in plenty of gardens around here. You wouldn't happen to know anyone with access to it, would you? Sarah's stomach lurched. Oleander. She remembered Daniel, weeks ago, plucking leaves from the hedge behind his garage, grinding them down, his eyes lit with feverish excitement. No, she said flatly. I wouldn't. Harris tilted his head, studying her. All right, but I'll tell you something. Mrs. Whitmore poison's a coward's weapon. It's almost always personal. Sarah forced a brittle smile. What are you suggesting, detective? Nothing yet, Harris replied, his tone deceptively calm. But grief has a way of revealing truths. Eventually, later that evening, Daniel showed up at her back door. Sarah nearly screamed when she saw him, his figure looming in the dark. What are you doing here? She hissed, pulling him inside before the neighbors noticed. You've been ignoring me, Daniel snapped, his eyes blazing. We did this together, you and me. Don't you dare shut me out now. Sarah's pulse raced. Keep your voice down. The detective was here today. He knows it was poison. Do you realize how dangerous this is? Daniel stepped closer, his breath hot against her face. Dangerous? We're free now. No more Michael. No more being trapped. You should be thanking me. Sarah shoved him back, tears springing to her eyes. Ethan might die, Daniel. My son. If that happens, this is over. Forever. For the first time, Daniel's confidence faltered. His jaw tightened. Don't pin that on me. You knew the risk. You wanted this as much as I did. Her hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to hit him, to deny everything. But deep down, Daniel was right. She had wanted this. She had whispered the idea first. She had pressed the wine glass into Michael's hand. Now Ethan was paying the price. The next morning, Sarah returned to the hospital, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Ethan was still unconscious, his small body dwarfed by the machines. As she sat by his side, Detective Harris appeared again, silent as a shadow. He pulled a chair beside her, lowering his voice. You know, he said softly, I've been doing this job a long time. People lie to me every day. Husbands, wives, lovers. They think they're clever, but lies always crack. Always? Sarah stiffened, her eyes glued to her son. Tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, Harris continued. Who do you trust enough to let into your kitchen? Who do you trust enough to share your darkest thoughts with? Her breath hitched. Harris's words weren't random. He was circling closer. Maybe too close. The detective's net Detective Harris sat at his cluttered desk long after the precinct had quieted. The case file was spread wide open, photos of the Whitmore dining room, medical reports, Michael's autopsy confirming poison, Ethan's toxicology showing the same. But what gnawed at him wasn't just the poison. It was Sarah Whitmore herself. She was composed to composed. Her grief felt rehearsed, her answers careful as if she were acting a part she hadn't rehearsed enough. Harris lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and muttered to himself, "She's hiding something. Someone." The next morning, Harris drove back to the Whitmore residence. Neighbors were outside watering lawns, walking dogs, casting furtive glances at the house where whispers of murder hung heavy. He caught sight of Mrs. Lasker, the Whitmore's elderly neighbor. She leaned over her fence, eyes sharp despite her age. "Detective," she called, her voice eager. "You're here again about the Whitmores?" "Yes, ma'am." "You know the family well?" "Well enough. Michael was a good man, quiet but steady." "Sarah," she hesitated, lips pressing tight. "Sarah's been different these past few months. I've seen a man, someone who isn't her husband, slip into the house when Michael was at work." Harris's pulse quickened. "This man, can you describe him?" "Tall, dark hair, bit rough around the edges. Always parked the houses down like he didn't want to be seen." "Bingo." Harris thanked her, leaving her with a card. As he slid into his car, a grim smile tugged at his lips. A lover. That explained the tension, the secrets. Affairs and poison often walked hand in hand. That evening, Sarah sat across from Daniel in a dimly lit cafe far from town. She had insisted they meet somewhere discreet, away from prying eyes. Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice. "You look nervous." "Relax. They don't have anything on us." "You don't understand," Sarah hissed. "The detective knows it was poison. He asked me who I trusted enough to let into the kitchen." "He's circling you, Daniel. He's circling us." Daniel smirked, sipping his coffee. "Let him circle. I covered my tracks. I wore gloves. I wiped everything down. They'll never find proof." Sarah's stomach twisted. His arrogance was suffocating. "But what if Ethan talks?" she whispered. "What if he remembers something?" Daniel's expression darkened, a shadow passing over his features. "Then we have a problem. A big one." Sarah's heart stilled. The way he said it, it wasn't concern. It was threat. 2 days later, Harris returned to the hospital. Ethan had woken at last, weak and groggy but alive. Sarah sat at his bedside, clutching his hand like a lifeline. Harris's tone was gentle. When he addressed the boy, "Ethan, I know this is hard, but do you remember anything from that night? Anything at all? Who poured your drink? What you ate? Who was there?" Ethan's eyes fluttered, his voice a broken whisper. "Mom poured the wine, but she gave Dad his glass first." Sarah froze, every muscle in her body tightening. Harris didn't miss it. He filed the detail away carefully, his mind stitching threads together. "Thank you, Ethan," Harris said, softly. He placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder before turning to Sarah. His eyes lingered on her a beat too long. On his way out, he muttered under his breath, "It's always the ones closest to you." That night, Harris placed a call to his partner. "I want surveillance on Sarah Whitmore. Phone records, bank statements, the works. And find out who this mystery man is. If she's got a lover, he's the missing piece." The net was tightening. Sarah could feel it even before she knew. Every word she spoke, every move she made, Harris was watching. And Daniel? Daniel was starting to unravel, his confidence shifting into recklessness. Cracks in the affair. Sarah sat in her kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of her. The house was too quiet now to hollow. Michael's laughter no longer filled the rooms, and Ethan's soft voice was a fragile thread that kept her tethered to something human. But in the silence, Sarah heard echoes: the clinking of glasses, the cough that never stopped, the thud of a body falling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael collapsing at the dinner table. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Daniel, meet me tonight." No excuses. Sarah exhaled sharply. Daniel's texts had shifted from tender to commanding, from "I miss you" to "do as I say." She thought she had control once, that she was orchestrating everything. But now it felt like Daniel was the puppeteer, and she the unwilling marionette. That evening, they met in his truck at the edge of an abandoned construction site. Daniel leaned across the seat and kissed her hard, but Sarah didn't kiss back. What's wrong with you? He muttered, pulling back. They're watching me, she said, voice shaking. Detective Harris knows about us. He came back again. He knows Michael was poisoned, Daniel. And Ethan, she stopped, her throat tightening. Ethan remembers. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What exactly does he remember? That I poured the drinks, she whispered. Daniel slammed his fist against the steering wheel, making Sarah jump. Then you're the one in trouble, not me. Don't forget that. His tone was sharp, cruel. Gone was the charming man who once whispered promises of escape and freedom. In his place was someone ruthless, someone who saw her as expendable. You helped me, Daniel hissed. That makes you just as guilty. You think you can run crying to the cops, blame me, and walk away free? No, if I go down, you go down too. Sarah's stomach knotted. The realization hit her like a blade. She wasn't Daniel's partner. She was his hostage. The next morning, Sarah sat by Ethan's bedside, her hand gently stroking his hair. His fragile frame broke her heart, and guilt gnawed at her insides. He opened his eyes slowly, whispering, Mom? Yes, sweetheart. I'm here, she said, forcing a smile. Was it you? Ethan asked softly, his eyes glassy but sharp with the innocence of truth. Did you give us the bad wine? Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She couldn't answer. She wanted to scream no, it wasn't me, it was Daniel. But her lips stayed sealed, trapped by fear. Before she could speak, the door opened. Detective Harris entered, nodding politely but his eyes scanning every detail. How are you feeling, Ethan? Harris asked. Better, Ethan whispered. But I remember more now. I saw someone else in the kitchen. Sarah's head snapped toward her son, her blood running cold. Harris leaned in, his notebook ready. Who, Ethan? Who did you see? Ethan frowned, his memory foggy. A man, tall, with dark hair. He wasn't Dad. Sarah's heart stopped. Daniel. Harris's eyes flicked toward her, sharp as a blade. Mrs. Whitmore, is there something you'd like to tell me? Sarah swallowed hard, forcing composure. No, detective. My son must be confused. He's been through so much. But Harris didn't buy it. He saw the tremor in her hands, the way her voice faltered. Later that night, Daniel showed up at Sarah's back door, uninvited. His presence was menacing, his smile sharp. You need to keep Ethan quiet, he said bluntly. If he remembers too much, everything falls apart. Sarah recoiled. He's just a child. He's my son. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then protect him. Make sure he doesn't talk, or I'll make sure of it myself. Sarah's breath hitched. For the first time, she realized Daniel wasn't just dangerous, he was a predator circling her family. And maybe the only way to save Ethan now was to turn against the man she once thought she loved. Ethan's Truth hospital room smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender, the kind of smell that clung to walls and lingered in the air. Sarah sat in the chair beside Ethan's bed, her fingers twisting the edge of a blanket as if unraveling the threads might undo the web she had spun around them. Ethan stirred, his small face pale but alert. Michael's eyes locked onto hers. Mom, he whispered, his voice raspy but steadier than before. Sarah leaned closer, brushing his hair back. Yes, sweetheart, I'm right here. I remember, Ethan said suddenly. The night Dad got sick. I saw him. Sarah froze. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Who, Ethan? Who did you see? She asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. Ethan frowned, his brow furrowing in concentration. The man who came into the kitchen. He wasn't Dad. He wasn't you. He blinked slowly. He gave me a glass too. He said it was just juice. Sarah's stomach lurched. Daniel. It had to be Daniel. Before she could respond, the door creaked open. Detective Harris stepped inside, his notebook in hand, his eyes sharp. Mind if I come in? He asked politely, but it wasn't a request. Sarah stiffened. Of course, detective. Ethan's resting though. Harris pulled up a chair, settling on the other side of the bed. He looked at Ethan with a gentle smile. Hey, buddy, you're being really brave. Can you tell me what you just told your mom? Sarah's throat tightened. Ethan glanced at her, uncertain, but Harris's calm, steady presence coaxed the words out. A man, Ethan said softly. Tall, dark hair. I don't know his name. He was in the kitchen that night. He gave me a drink. Harris's gaze flickered to Sarah. He didn't speak, but his silence was louder than words. Sarah's face burned under his scrutiny. Thank you, Ethan, Harris said finally, patting the boy's hand. That helps a lot. You did the right thing. Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. She wanted to scream, to confess, to throw Daniel's name into the air like a lifeline, but fear kept her silent. Daniel's threats still echoed in her ears. If I go down, you go down too. That evening, Sarah paced her darkened kitchen. The walls felt closer, the shadows deeper. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, we need to talk. Now. Her hand shook as she answered. What are you doing here? She hissed when she saw him standing outside her back door, his figure a dark silhouette against the porch light. He let himself in, his confidence chilling. I heard Harris was at the hospital again. Ethan talked, didn't he? Sarah backed away. He remembered you. He saw you in the kitchen. Daniel's jaw clenched, but then he smiled a cold, cruel smile. Then we make sure nobody believes him. He's just a kid, easy to discredit. But you, he stepped closer, his breath hot against her cheek. You're the one they'll crucify. You poured the wine, remember? Sarah's chest tightened. Daniel was right. Harris already suspected her. And if Ethan's memory became clearer, she would be painted as the monster who poisoned her own family. You said you loved me, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's expression hardened. Love? Sarah, this isn't about love anymore. It's about survival. And if you want to keep that boy breathing, his eyes glinted dangerously, you'll keep him quiet. Sarah's blood ran cold. For the first time, she saw Daniel, not as her secret lover, not even as her co-conspirator, but as a wolf in her home, circling her son, and she realized she had a choice to make, either betray Daniel or lose Ethan forever. The trapped night was heavy, thick with silence, as Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the untouched glass of water before her. Every creak in the house made her flinch. Upstairs, Ethan slept fitfully, his small breaths carrying through the baby monitor she had dug out of storage, her paranoia demanding constant proof he was alive. Daniel's words haunted her. She whispered, quiet, glancing at the stairs as though Daniel could hear her through the walls. Daniel wasn't. I need help. He was dangerous, desperate, then Harris spoke, and unpredictable. Calm but firm. If she didn't tell me what's happening, she and Ethan would both be swallowed by his darkness. Ethan remembers, but there was still Sarah Detective said, Harris. Her words she grabbed her phone, in a rush, her hands Daniel, trembling, he threatened him, and dialed the number Harris had left on his business card. It rang twice before his low, steady voice answered. Please, Detective Harris, you have to believe me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I believe you, Harris said softly. But if we're going to stop him, we need evidence. Real evidence. Will you help me get it? Sarah swallowed hard. Her mind screamed at her to say no, to run, to protect Ethan at all costs. But another part of her, the mother, the survivor, knew this was the only way out. Yes, she whispered. Tell me what to do. The plan was simple in words but deadly in execution. Sarah would meet Daniel again, play along, and get him to talk while Harris and his team listened from the shadows. The next evening, Sarah stood at the edge of the park where she and Daniel used to meet in secret. The air was cool, the wind carrying the scent of pine and damp grass. She clutched her purse tightly, inside it a small recording device Harris had slipped her that afternoon. When Daniel arrived, his smile was sharp, predatory. You came, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She stiffened but forced a smile. I had to, she murmured. We need to talk. They walked along the path, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Sarah kept her voice low, measured. Ethan, he remembers more every day. What if he tells someone? What if Harris believes him? Daniel smirked. Then we make sure nobody listens. Kids are unreliable witnesses. Besides, it's not like you're innocent here. Who poured the poison, Sarah? Who stood by while your husband's face turned blue? Her breath caught. Harris's device was recording every word. You made me do it, she said, her voice quivering just enough to sound natural. Daniel chuckled darkly. Don't rewrite history, sweetheart. You wanted him gone as much as I did. You said it yourself. Michael was holding you back. Now it's just you, me, and the boy. Once Ethan learns to keep his mouth shut, we'll be free. Sarah forced herself not to recoil. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the recorder would pick it up. She needed more, something undeniable. Daniel, if they find out, we'll both go to prison, she said softly. We'll lose everything. Don't you ever feel guilty? His laugh was cold, cruel. Guilty? I did what needed to be done. And if anyone gets in our way, your son, that nosy detective, even you. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss in her ear. I'll do it again. Sarah froze. Her body screamed to run, to scream, but she held steady. That was it. That was The confession Harris needed. A faint rustle in the trees told her they weren't alone. Harris was out there. She had delivered the wolf into the hunter's trap. Daniel reached for her hand, but this time Sarah pulled away. Her eyes met his, no longer full of longing or fear, but of resolve. "It's over, Daniel," she whispered. Suddenly, shadows emerged from the trees. Flashlights cut through the darkness. "Daniel Reeve." Harris's voice thundered. "Step away from her. Hands where I can see them." Daniel spun, his face twisting from shock to fury. "You set me up," he snarled at Sarah, betrayal flashing in his eyes. For a heartbeat, Sarah thought he might lunge at her, but Harris's team closed in, guns drawn. Daniel's choices narrowed to nothing. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, Daniel's gaze locked on Sarah. His voice was low, venomous. "This isn't over. You'll pay for this. Both of you." Sarah shivered, but for the first time in months, she also felt something else: hope. The courtroom, the courthouse, was colder than Sarah expected. Its marble floors echoed with footsteps, each one like a hammer against her nerves. She sat at the defendant's table, hands folded tightly in her lap, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on her. Across from her sat Daniel, in a dark suit provided by his lawyer. The smirk never left his face, as if the walls of justice meant nothing to him. He leaned back casually, eyes locked on her with a predator's calm. Detective Harris sat in the gallery, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He had done his job, secured the arrest, but now the system would decide what to do with the broken pieces of truth. The judge, a stern woman with piercing eyes, entered. "Court is now in session for the trial of Sarah Callahan and Daniel Reeve." Sarah's stomach turned at the sound of her own name paired with his. Co-defendants, criminal partners, poisoners. Her lawyer, a weary man named Green, leaned close. "Stay calm. Don't let Daniel rattle you. We'll push your cooperation with the police. That's your lifeline." Sarah nodded, though her body screamed to flee. The prosecution began. The district attorney, sharp in her navy suit, painted a picture of betrayal, a wife conspiring with her lover to poison her husband, with her son caught in the crossfire. Every word struck like a lash, but the evidence, that was the dagger. The recordings from Sarah's meeting with Daniel were played aloud. The jury leaned forward, listening to Daniel's arrogant admissions, his laughter, his threats. "I did what needed to be done." Who poured the poison, Sarah? "If anyone gets in our way, your son." "That detective. Even you, I'll do it again." The courtroom was silent when the tape ended, the weight of Daniel's words filling every corner. Sarah dared to glance at the jurors. Some looked horrified, others hardened, but all eyes flicked back to her, as though waiting for her to crumble under the guilt. Then came the witness testimonies. Neighbors described the perfect Callahan family, their shock at Michael's sudden death. A pharmacist testified about Sarah's purchase of the very chemicals used in the poisoning. And then, Ethan. Sarah's heart nearly stopped when she saw her son enter the courtroom, clutching his small hands together, guided gently by a child advocate. His dark eyes darted nervously, searching until they found hers. She mouthed, "It's okay. Be brave." The advocate asked simple questions, but even so, every answer was a knife. "Did you see your father the night he died?" "Yes." "Did you see what your mother gave him?" "A drink." "And what happened?" Ethan's voice shook. "He got sick, really sick. I tried to yell but I couldn't breathe. Then I got sick too." Tears burned Sarah's eyes. He looked so small, so fragile, yet his words carried the power to damn her forever. "Do you remember anyone else there?" For a moment, Ethan was silent. His lip trembled. Then, almost in a whisper, "Daniel." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge's gavel slammed for silence. Sarah's heart cracked. Ethan had seen it all. He had carried this burden silently, and now he was forced to relive it before strangers. She wanted to rush to him, to hold him, to tell him none of this was his fault. But all she could do was sit still as his truth unraveled everything. When it was her turn, Sarah took the stand. Her lawyer had warned her, "Be honest, but careful." The jury didn't want excuses. They wanted humanity. She gripped the wooden rail, her voice trembling. "I was weak. I was lonely. Daniel made me believe I deserved more than I had. He fed me lies, promises, and I believed him. I didn't mean to hurt Michael. I didn't mean to hurt Ethan." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "But I did, and I will carry that guilt forever." Her words hung in the air. The DA's cross-examination was brutal. "So, You admit you poisoned your husband? Sarah swallowed. Yes, but I was manipulated. You were manipulated? The DA's voice rose. Or did you simply want your husband out of the way so you could live your fantasy with your lover? Sarah's voice broke. I thought I was in love, but I see now I was being used. The DA turned sharply to the jury. Used or not, ladies and gentlemen, she still chose to pour the poison. And a man is dead because of it. When the day ended, Sarah sat slumped in her chair. The jury had heard everything. Daniel's venom, her own guilt, Ethan's fragile truth. The verdict was yet to come, but Sarah knew one thing for certain: whatever happened next, her life as she knew it was over. And Daniel, he wasn't finished with her yet. The verdict courtroom was hushed, heavy with anticipation. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Neighbors, reporters, curious strangers, all waiting for the jury to return. Sarah sat at the defense table, her hands clammy, her pulse hammering so loudly she thought it might echo in the room. Daniel, as always, looked utterly unbothered. His lips curled into that same smug smile, the one that made Sarah's stomach twist. He tapped his fingers lightly against the table, as if he already knew the outcome. The bailiff called the jury back in. 12 solemn faces filed into their seats, none giving away a hint of what they had decided. Members of the jury, the judge's voice cut through the tension. Have you reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, the foreman replied. Sarah's breath caught. This was it. The foreman stood, unfolding the slip of paper in his hand. In the case of the state versus Daniel Reeve, we find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps filled the courtroom. Daniel didn't flinch. He just leaned back, eyes locked on Sarah, his grin widening as though even in defeat, he had won something. Sarah's heart leapt, then crashed as the foreman continued. In the case of the state versus Sarah Callahan, we find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. Her world went black around the edges. Her knees nearly gave out beneath the weight of the words. Guilty. No matter the manipulation, no matter her cooperation, she was still guilty. A sob broke from her throat. She covered her face with her hands, but the tears couldn't be stopped. Daniel leaned slightly toward her,